Hello everyone, so welcome back, and we're going to look at a gradebook example and talk through a little bit more about the pass by value and pass by reference. So pass by reference improves performance by eliminating the need to copy possible large amounts of data. So all arguments are passed by value actually. So a method call can pass two types of values to a method: copies of primitive types and copies of references to objects. Objects themselves cannot be passed. So we already had a look at a previous example when we used the int element, and it referenced it was down in the other method, and it basically, if you modify a reference type parameter so that it refers to another object, only the parameter refers to the new object. So the reference stored in the callers variable still refers to the original object. That's really important. So with the arrays, then we're going to have a look at the gradebook example. So I've done out the example already, and I'll link below the previous gradebook example so you can compare as well. And so we're going to go through some of this. So at the moment we have two private instance variables. One is a string type, and it's called course name, and one is an array, and we know it's an int type array, and it's called grades. And then we have the constructor here, which is public gradebook, and it has string course name and int array grades. So we can also call these different things as well, because when we're calling the gradebook in the gradebook test, we know that we have to put in a string here, and usually that's into inverted quotation marks, and then whatever the array is as well that you call the array. So if we look at the gradebook example, gradebook test first. So here we have our gradebook new. You can call it my gradebook, or I like to use the lowercase for when you're creating a new object. And then the constructor obviously calls for two different arguments within the gradebook. So one is the string. So welcome to Learn Computers with Ali, Java programming, and that was the string. And then it passes through the array grades array. Now, from the previous video, we already spoke about calling arrays. When you call the array, you just call the name of it. Very important, because this is initializing an array here as an int type array, and it's called grades array. And then we have our initializer list already knows the length, and it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the length is 10. So if we go back then to gradebook, so we know that when gradebook is instantiated in the other in the gradebook test, we know that when the course name is put in here, that it's assigned to the course name of the class. Okay, because we're using the this variable, and it's a private variable, so it's not accessible outside of this class unless you use setters and getters, which we know from the account example already. So we have our set here, and it's setting it as course name to course name and then returning it. And then obviously we have the other thing to do, which is our grades, which is also private up here, so we need to do that as well. So we have our process grades method here, which is also called in the gradebook test, which we can see here, gradebook dot process grades. And we know from previous videos that I said it's class name dot, using the dot operator to get the method, and the method name is process grades. You do not need to say class name dot method when it's a static method within the same class. So you can see here that I have called output grades, and that is another method within this class. Obviously we can identify it here with the round brackets. So if I go down to output grades, the best thing about the IDE, the Integrated Development Environment, is that when you highlight it, it shows where it's used, and you can see it here. And you can also click on, I think it's control, and then it will bring you down to the definition as well. It depends on your computer, I've got it set up differently. So I have output grades here so we can see what it does. So it's system out, printf, the grades are, and then new line, and then it has a for loop. It's using a counter control, which we know that we cannot use the enhanced for loop if we're using the counter within it. So we have int student equals 0, and then student is less than, always less than the length, grades.length. So if process grades is called within the gradebook test, then let me just go back here. Gradebook process grades is called here. We have our get course name on the top. The grades array is being passed in as the array that's going to be used. Then process grades uses this grades array in gradebook. So when, if I go back up here, when we initialize the private int grades, we didn't say the length of it here, or we didn't give it an initializer list. That came from the grades book test here. Okay, you with me so far? So when I go back down here to output grades, it's actually taking the grades from gradebook test because it's assigned it to grades within this class, and so it already knows the length and goes through that and then prints out the student and student plus 1, and then obviously grades, and then student is our counter actually. So our counter from 0 onwards. So if we go back up here then to process grades, I'm sure there's a couple of different, it's the main method that's being used. So we have get average, and that prints it out, and then we also have get minimum and get maximum, and then output. So we have get average. So if we go down to get average first, usually it depends on where you're writing code, but wherever it's called, so you should put it closest to where it's called. So if I have get average and it's here, maybe I should move that up. But we also need the minimum and maximum. Okay, anyway. You should move it up then to see here, so that when you're reading it, it's easier to read. So we have our output grades, which we should put actually here, and then get average here, and then get minimum and get maximum. Then it would make sense to have them in that order, because and obviously be really careful with your brackets. You can see here that I highlighted the curly bracket down here first to make sure I had my matching one before I moved it. So just to clean it up for readability. Now it's also kind of a matter of preference. You can see now it's gone to error because I've deleted it, but now that's better. So we have our output grades, get average is the next one. It's very logical then because it's a little bit easier to read. But you can put methods in different places, and obviously as the code grows larger within companies, a lot of the time the methods are at the end of a lot of classes, or the instance variables are at the top in a huge list, and then logical way of reading it. But I like to just do it this way. It's also a matter of preference, and there's usually a style within the programmers in the team that have a style of the way they like it. So we have output grades here. That's our first method that's called within process grades. Process grades has been called from gradebook test, and we should now call programming linking because it's all linked together. So we have our first output grades are called first, and then our get average. So we have our obviously here now we already know from the method call stack from our last in first out that our local variables within our methods are going to go away afterwards. But you can see here that if it's returning a get average, and printing it out, then it returns with the return address back from the stack frame, and it allocates it then to the get average. So here is our int total. We're using an enhanced for loop, and this is all it's doing is taking the int grade, getting all of the array grades, and then adding to the total. So and obviously dividing then by the grades length here. We're getting the minimum. We're doing an enhanced again. If grade is less than low grade, then grade is going to be assigned to low grade and return low grade, and same with high grade, it's the opposite. And then outputting the bar chart, which we've already seen the grade distribution and our stars. So I won't go through this in too much detail, but we have a length int array here. We have an enhanced for loop as well. Pre-incrementation of the frequency and assigning the grade to divided by 10. So with this then we have our counter control loop, and if the count is equal, is 2 equals is comparison, like I said, so equals in English language equals 10, then print out this, otherwise print out that, and then print out the stars based on the distribution. So we have this is called a nested for. So we have our for here, and then another for in it. So this if else statement runs first, and then this for statement runs within this for loop. So it obviously takes, when you're reading it, think about why you'd nest it. So if there is a count here, you can use the count within the for loop, and then outside of the for loop it's non-existent. So it goes away, like we said. So we have our count here is from 0 to the frequency length. Frequency length is 11. Here we go through, we use it again to assign 0 to 10 here. And I think I'll just check one thing for my stars. I think that should be something else. Anyway, we'll come back to it shortly. So we have the output then. So values in array 1 by row are 1, 2, 3. If I go back up to my grade, values are in array 1 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Values in array 2 by row are 1, 2, 3. So this is in init array. Sorry, this is the wrong thing that is output. We want the gradebook output, not that one. This is the other one for the 2-dimensional array, which we'll come to in a minute. Oh, no. So welcome to Gradebook for welcome to learn computers with Ali, Java programming, because when we go to the Gradebook test, it has our main, so that's our entry point. Let's go back to the grades are from 1 to 10, student 1 to 10, and they're the numbers, and then the class average is 84.9. Lowest grade, highest grade, and then grade distribution. So if we take a look then at our student, let's say, and we go back here, where does it say student? That's our output bar chart. Here, output grades student, 0 to grades length, but we have here, and this is why it's going from 1, student plus 1. So not from 0. And then we allocate each of the iterations 0 to less than the grade's length in the output grade. So I hope that's pretty clear. Let's go through it again. So we have our instance variables course name, our integer array called grades. When we use the constructor, we use it in the gradebook test. In the gradebook test, you can see here gradebook, which is the name of the class here. And we instantiate it as lowercase gradebook equals new, and then gradebook, and then passing through a string and an array. And we just use the name of the array. And the name of the array is grades array. And there is a int array, grades array, and it's an initializer list that's used. And then we print it out what we call the get course name, and we also call the process grades. So if we go back here to get course name, that's when we have already used course name here, and then we pass it back through it again, and we use the process grades. But within the process grades, like the examples that we used previously, and that is you have an employee and a boss, and the boss sends the employee to do a task, and the employee is then allowed to ask as many people in their department for help that's necessary to do the task. And that is basically the equivalent of a method asking multiple methods to go and do something and come back. Now, because there are multiple methods, there is also multiple returns, there are multiple stacks, and then there are multiple returns within that as well. So you have, within this process grades, you have process grades, and then obviously it's going to go like the plates example, go out and back with the return address, and then out and back with the return address. And then once it's finished, the program execution control goes back to the where it was called from. So once this goes down here, executes all of this, then it returns it back to output grades. Same with get average, and does the task, brings it back, finishes it, comes back. Same with get minimum, get maximum, and the output bar chart. So the output bar chart is using the exact same things that we've already gone through, but we use the enhanced for loop as well, because we didn't need to access the counter control. It just put in an incrementation on the array. And then here we have our count from 0 less than the length, because otherwise we'd have an array out of bounds error. And then we have our nested if else within it is nested within the for statement, and our nested for statement within the for statement. So it obviously uses the count here. That's kind of logical. It's important to know that when you're using a for statement, if you're using the counter control in the outer one, then more than likely you're going to use it within the inner one, and that's one of the reasons for using it. So I'm going to now go on to multi-dimensional arrays, which you already had a little sneak peek with the output. So with the multi-dimensional arrays, all you do are two sets of square brackets and name the array. And then we have 1, 2, 3 here for our rows and columns. And again here, rows and columns, values in array 1 by row are, and then it's calling a method called output array. We have output array. It takes in the definition of the method, you have to actually call it. But when you're using output array, you can see here it's just the name that's passed through. So we have int type two-dimensional array called array name. I call it array name because we're going to pass in array 1 first, and then array 2, and it's just the array name that we're going to use. And first it takes in the rows 0 to less than the array length, and increments it, and the columns, and then prints it out as well. And then prints out a new line every time it goes through the for loop as well. That's important because we already experimented with that. We're moving it, so and you already know that what happens. So we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have here this is our row, next row, next row. This is one row and another row, and that's it. That's a multi-dimensional array. So each time you have an initializer list, if you already know the different ones, then this is our row. Our full row here is 1, 2, 3. The first one is so 1 and 4 is the column, 1, 3, and 4 is the next column, and so on and so forth. The same as similar to matrices. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll post up a case study based on the gradebook. Again, I'm glad we revisited it. We're going to revisit another example as well with two-dimensional arrays that we've already covered, and I'll put the link below to the previous one. Okay, thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel and press like if you liked it.